Good evening, Springfield. Welcome to the Township of Springfield Planning Board meeting, November 28th, 2022 Planning Board meeting. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with the Sunshine Laws. Notice was published on September 29th in the local source, which is now the official newspaper of the Township of Springfield for 2022 and posted in the Annex Building on September 29th, 2022. Let's do a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Miss Rich Huber, he did that for us all the time. Can we have a quick roll call?
Yes, sir. Mayor Alexander Kaiser is absent. Committeeman Rich Huber is absent. Mr. David Barnett. I think he's going to be logging in pretty soon. Mr. Andrew Schwartz.
Present.
Mr. Aaron Locker.
Here.
Mr. Brian Brendel is absent. Ms. Marissa Ruggiero.
Here.
Mr. Scott Wishner.
Here.
Vice Chair Sharon Kessel is absent, and Chairman Jeff Tiger.
I'm here, and Mr. Barnett's face joined as well. If you could just call his name.
Great, Mr. David Barnett.
Here.
Thank
Perfect.
you. We have a quorum.
Yep. Perfect. Great. Okay, so everyone had a chance to review last meeting. We had Florida Court come to us on an amended site plan for repositioning of the driveway. It was application 3/2022S on Route 22. Everyone had a chance to review said resolution. Anyone have any questions or concerns? Seeing none, does someone make a motion to adopt the resolution for the amended site plan?
So moved.
Anyone second?
I'll second.
Perfect. We have a roll call?
Mr. Barnett,
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Let's do a couple of discussion items. First off, the 2023 calendar is out. It's on the Google Drive. I'm Mr. January. Just kidding. There's no pictures. It's just a list of the dates. The dates, we typically tried to stay to the first Monday of every month, but given some holidays and so forth, we moved some stuff around. Please familiarize yourself with it. The board will adopt it comes January at our reorganization meeting, but I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of it. Also, if everyone recalled, the planning board on a condition of approval worked with the developer, Church Mall, the Caldwell Playground. From what I understand, the funds of the developer did make its way to the Board of Education. Board of Education has been partnering with Mr. Disco on the design of the playground and is going to unveil that playground design on December 6th at Caldwell's PTA meeting. Sharon and myself are going. Anyone from the board is more than welcome to go. It's an open meeting that anyone can go to. We're just going to represent the planning board. Mr. Disco, you have anything to add for the board?
No, they have renderings. They have a multi-play composite play thing with slides. Looks like they're going to have 3 play elements, distinct areas for the playground. And I know they had 2 vendors they were vying back and forth with. And that's it.
Okay, and then from the board standpoint, Mr. Disco is the final sign off for the planning board for that condition of approval. Any questions? RFP committee, every year we review RFPs, we decide who are our professionals, we change them every year. I know that Jen has already started that process. We need to create a subcommittee. Anyone want to volunteer? I know I talked to Sharon earlier today and she was going to lead the subcommittee. Anyone willing to volunteer? I know Mr. Schwartz loves to volunteer for that. And Mr. Barnett, Wishna, anyone else would like to volunteer? Aaron?
Sure. Okay.
Andrew? So if it's Sharon is 1, Andrew is 2, Wishna? Aaron? Yes. Okay.
The pleasure of showing up to the meeting is getting put on the subcommittee, huh?
Yes. 1, 2. So we have 4 people. So Sharon, Andrew.
Sure. If you need one, I'm fine.
Perfect. Sharon, Andrew, Wishna, and Barnett. The 4 of them will review the things, report back to the board in the new year. Perfect. Next item for discussion or the application is the Goods One LLC 9-2022 S 355 Route 22 East, Block 3903, Lot 4. This was preliminary final site plan for a conditional use of a cannabis dispensary. The board's aware that we heard this application about a month ago. Since then, a lot has happened. I've received numerous letters on behalf of the board, and I had an opportunity to talk to counsel, Emily, and basically what has come out of all these letters is that this board does not have jurisdiction to hear this application. Back in 2012, the application went before the zoning board for that site plan. And that site, at the time, the zoning board retained jurisdiction of it, just like how we retain jurisdiction of some of the sites. So what my recommendation to the board, and we can hear from council, was that we would administratively move this application over to the zoning board of adjustment. They would still have to notice. They will not have to submit a new application, and that they would contact our board secretary, Ms. Law, to schedule a date. Emily, would you like to give some update on that? And then we'll hear from council if council's on.
Sure. Just very quickly, you basically covered it, but back in 2012, the zoning board did in their resolution for this property said that there'll be no change in the usage of the premises without returning to the zoning board. And I paraphrased the section of their resolution that I took that from, but in an abundance of caution, both for the board and for the applicant, as you all know, if the board acts and doesn't have jurisdiction, the decision is void anyway. So we believe at this point it's in everybody's best interest for the applicant to appear before the zoning board, who we believe does have the jurisdiction to hear this application. As you said, it will be administratively transferred. They will have to renotice, but they will not have to reapply, and they'll work with Ms. Law to be heard as soon as possible so they don't lose any time because of the confusion and the jurisdictional issue.
Any members of the board have any questions? I see that the attorney's on, and I want to give him a few minutes to address the board. Any questions right now, or can I hold questions until we hear from council? Sure. Apu, I believe the attorney has his hand raised, or electronically hand raised. If you can pull in, is he on there now?
Yeah.
He was on there.
It looks like he's coming on now.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure you heard from me and our council. I reviewed your letter today with our council, and I think we came to the conclusion, rather to be safe than sorry, is I know that there was some direction from the township officials that it should be planning versus zoning, but the resolution says that they retain jurisdiction, and that's where I kind of headed, just as an abundance of caution. If this application gets appealed, then we'd be back in the same place, and we'd lose more time and money and effort that applying to the zoning board and getting on as soon as possible. The zoning board secretary is the same as planning. She'll work with you to do it. But let me give you an opportunity for a couple of minutes to kind of address the board and talk to council.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Tiger, and thank the board for hearing us again tonight and scheduling this special meeting to hear us and other applications. As you heard from Mr. Tiger, we submitted a letter this afternoon in response to an objection raised by PM Pediatrics.
Can I interrupt you, counsel, 1 second? For the board, it's on the Google Drive available for you to read. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sure. So we submitted a letter in response to an objection raised by PM Pediatrics regarding the jurisdiction of the board and raising the issue that the 2012 zoning board resolution retained jurisdiction and deprived this board of jurisdiction over the Goods application. So as you heard, the Goods filed this application with the administrative officer in September, after receiving a letter from the zoning official stating that the site was in the HC zone and a permitted cannabis dispensaries are permitted use in the zone. That came after a letter from the governing body stating the same thing. So we submitted this application to the administrative officer, Ms. Law, and the application wasn't administratively transferred to the zoning board at that time. Subsequent to that, the application was deemed complete, and after the application was deemed complete, we received a request from the township engineer to submit a statement of compliance with the 2012 zoning board resolution, where we stated we had complied with it. And subsequent to that, no mention of transferring the application to the zoning board or to appear before the zoning board was made to us. Similarly, we received a review letter from the board planner, also acknowledging the 2012 site plan approval from the zoning board. And again, no mention of this board not having jurisdiction was made in that letter. And as you know, we appeared before you in October and proceeded with at least one witness. So we understand that the zoning board did have a condition in there where it says something to the effect of there should be no, in the event of a change in the details of the construction or use or improvements, that an applicant should return to that board. But that provision, in our view, and at least with respect to the site at issue here, 355 US Route 22 East, really has never been interpreted by the boards or by the zoning official to require return to the zoning board on a change in really anything. That hasn't, there's really no resolutions in the file from 2012 to now where the zoning board reviewed anything that has happened at that site. So we're a little, we are a little bit surprised that the boards and their attorneys and the are now interpreting this provision in this way at this time, after we have went through the time and expense of preparing the application, noticing the application, even starting the hearing last month. So it's the Goods position that this board should hear this application as it began, and really the everything that's happened to this point really stops the board from reversing course now and sending us to the zoning board. With all that said, we do appreciate the planning board's recommendation that the matter be administratively transferred, and a new application not be needed. But it is our position that this board is the proper board to hear the application.
Emily?
So thank you for explaining everything in the history there, Mr. Catallo. I'm going to mispronounce that every time, and I'm sorry for that.
And I'm sorry, I don't think I gave my appearance again. Lawrence Catallo, O'Toole Scrivo, appearing for the applicant, the Goods LLC.
So I hear what you're saying, and I reviewed your letter a lot today. I went through everything that you raised because I wanted to be sure that we were not doing a disservice to the applicant, especially considering the time and effort that you've already put in. However, it's our position at this point that it's in everybody's best interest, including the applicants, to make sure that this is done properly. And the only board that can say that the zoning board doesn't have jurisdiction is the zoning board, because they're the ones that initially retained the jurisdiction. If this goes to them and they say that this is a planning board matter, then I don't even want to say that they'll send it back here, because I don't want to do that to you again. But I think out of an abundance of caution, especially considering there already is an objector, and this is not because the objector said to do it, but it's out of an abundance of caution to make sure that everything is done exactly properly, exactly by the existing resolutions. That we suggest that it go to the zoning board for, like I said earlier, for the protection of your client as well. Nobody wants to have an approval or a denial for that matter, and then have everything be voided because there was no jurisdiction from the start.
Yeah, I mean, Counselor, I got a letter from PM Pediatrics asking me to cancel the hearing before, and I said no, because they didn't have enough time to prepare. So we're not jumping at what they're doing. I think I concur with Counselor. I don't want to hear this for as many hours more as it needs to be heard, and then someone just appeal and reverse their decision saying that we didn't have jurisdiction, and then every one of our volunteers wasted their time. Look, I feel like there was a lot of things here that could have been different, but the best course of action to make sure that there's no problems going forward is to easily go to the zoning board. I mean, you could ask them to remand it back to us, but I think that would be more of a waste of your time. My goal would be to ask them to hear it. I mean, the good news is Mr. Disco is the engineer for the zoning board as well. There is a different planner. I would ask our planner to work with their planner to make sure they're up to speed. So there wouldn't necessarily need to be new review letters or anything from that nature. I mean, everything you should be able to hopefully get on, the next meeting, probably the beginning of January at that point in time. But we'll work with council on that. The council and the board secretary. So, I feel bad. All members got together to have a meeting tonight. I mean, I have another application after you. That would not have happened. We would have moved them to December 4th. We were here to hear you. We wanted to get the application. We all this was going to take 2-3 hours to hear this and move it. But I apologize. I think my hands are tied as the board. I'm going to open up I want to hear what the board has to say to see if they feel differently than me and council. But let me open up to the board right now, and then we'll go from there. Mr. Schwartz.
So yeah, I just have a question for council for the goods. I saw in your letter, the issue here seems to be a change in usage. Is it the applicant's position that putting a dispensary in that facility is not a change of use?
It's our position that it's a permitted use, and that the town has not typically required zoning board approval every time a new tenant goes into that shopping center.
Council, my question is putting a dispensary in that facility a change in an existing use?
Well, the zoning board's resolution uses the term usage, and that term is nowhere defined in your ordinance. So I really don't, reject the premise of your question.
So you're not going to take a position one way or the other?
No.
On the record?
No.
Okay, that makes it easy. Thank you.
Mr. Wishner?
I have no questions. I think if I wanted a little more background on this, other than what's in the letter and our council's comments earlier, is there any place else that was published? Because the letter you mentioned that was out on the shared drive, I was unaware was put out there until you just mentioned it.
Yeah.
Is there any other documentation for me to review other than what's been presented?
No, that we just received around noon today, plus or minus.
Okay, so all right, then I have no other questions.
Mr. Loeffler?
Loeffler.
I always make a mistake. Sorry.
You say Laufer, I say Loeffler. What's the difference? No, I don't have any other questions. It's unfortunate though that this happened, because it is a waste of people's time. I just thought somebody somewhere along the line could have been a little more careful. But no, I have no questions.
Mr. Girio?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
Nothing for me.
Okay, so Counselor, I'm sorry. We have asked that our board secretary work with you where we administratively transfer this to the zoning board. You will not have to do another application. Mr. Disco already wrote a letter, so everything's there and ready. I will ask Mr. Hughes to work with our zoning board planner, but I'm sure whatever he raised will be the same things that she would have done. This isn't a big difference, something that requires much more work. And I believe you should, reach out to Mrs. Law tomorrow and get yourself on the zoning board for the first earliest appointment, in which I would imagine would be January, given what they have. They have a meeting tomorrow, and then they have a meeting. I don't know when their meeting is in January, if it's time to notice or not, but work with her.
We appreciate the chair's due diligence in reviewing all the materials and recommendation that the matter be administratively transferred. But all I'll ask at this point is that our letter that you indicated you have in your file and it's on your drive be marked into the record as A1 for the purposes of this hearing, and you can move along with your meeting.
Thank you. Jen, make sure that goes along with that makes its way to the zoning board council, so he's aware and he can update the board on the history of the application when they come before.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Counselor. Good luck. Happy holidays, and good luck to the applicant.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Take care.
Sorry. Hope you come back soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along, the next application should be relatively short. This is for First Presbyterian Church of Springfield, application 10-2022. This is for an electric sign, LED sign, preliminary and final site plan with bulk variances. I know Counselor's on, you can bring her on. But what this guy, for the board's discussion, we'll have Mr. Disco bring up as well. This is just basically just like at the high school and like at the town hall, they had their old sign and they put an LED sign, so that way it would be much easier for them to be able to update what's going on in the church. Mr. Disco's reviewed it. I know he went out and did some measurements, and I think that's very important that you see it there. The measurements are well within what our township signs are and what the high school sign is, and less than what they're currently having up there anyway to begin with. So it should be relatively simple. Mr. Disco, anything to add before the applicant puts some brief testimony?
No, it is a sign replacement. It's in the same location as the existing ground manual letter sign. There are other electronic signs on Route 22, Acura, Autoland, and Care Station. And 21st Century Auto, which looks like they went to the Board of Adjustment in 2010 for that sign. I don't really remember when the other three signs were. They probably predated 2010 as a best guess. But I think you summed it up really what the application's for.
Yeah, and I think the three conditions I want the applicant to consider is when they present is, and then we can move forward is, this sign should only be for church business only for this particular site. No advertisement on the type of sign, and that in the event of a public emergency, the township, this is where the benefits outweigh the detriments. The township has the ability of an Amber Alert, COVID, whatever it might be, and work with the church. So those are the three things that came up in the review, but I'll turn it over to a counselor to give a very brief opening and have one of your witnesses on, and I think the board can work through this.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As you know, I'm Clara Horelick. I'm appearing on behalf of the applicant, First Presbyterian Church of Springfield. This is on application number 10, 2022-S, and this regards their property located at 210 Morris Avenue, which is block 208, lot 1.01 on the tax map. And that is a general commercial zone. As was stated, the relief that's being requested here tonight involves a freestanding, two-sided outdoor digital LED sign, which is also known as an electronic message center sign. And this would be placed, as stated, in the same location as the current existing sign, which is a manual sign. The subject variances that are being requested here this evening, and I will have the planner and the president of the church and the sign gentleman get into detail, but I will just briefly let you know what they are. It's section 3531.4C, which does not permit the digital signage, so accordingly a C variance is required. Section 3531.8B2 requires that the principal building provide a 50-foot front yard setback, and the current setback is 33.3 feet. However, the church isn't moving, and this is remaining the same. This is a pre-existing non-conforming condition with no proposed change. With regard to the next section, it's 3531.8B4, which requires that each sign have a setback of a minimum of 10 feet from the front lot line. The church is a corner lot, thus it has two front yards, two front lots. As such, it's 5.5 feet from Morris Avenue and 4.6 feet from Church Mall. Other ordinance sections that I think are worthy of mention in connection with this particular application is section 3531.1, and that sets forth the sign standards. And I believe it will be shown here tonight that the proposed sign will promote those standards. And then a very important section is 3531.5B1, which allows for a church or other public or institutional building to have for its own use an announcement sign or a bulletin board that would not exceed 32 square feet in area. The proposed sign is 24 square feet, and this is the church's announcement sign. And as to the other entities, it was already mentioned that those referenced in this section have digital signage, and that is the municipal building, the library, and the high school. And then the planner will briefly touch on 3522.2, which regards the site triangle. So this evening, I will be calling David Aris. He is the president of the church, First Presbyterian Church of Springfield. Thomas T.J. Rickey of Stonefield Engineering and Design, LLC. He is a licensed professional planner. And Chris Freeman of Stewart Signs. And he is expected that the testimony given tonight will address all the points that were set forth in the review letters from Michael Disco and Keenan Hughes. And just briefly, specifically, I'll state that it is expected that the testimony from the church president will show the hardship to the church regarding the existing manual sign, which requires volunteers from the church to manually insert letters on a signboard to spell out messages. The church congregation is aging, and getting volunteers is very difficult. And due to the poor condition of the sign and its location, it's become dangerous and very difficult in bad weather. Also, the testimony expected tonight from the sign representative will show that the proposed digital LED sign will solve all the church's signage problems. He will testify about the programming of the sign and the software regarding message scheduling, timing, duration, color brightness, and sizing. And finally, it is expected that the testimony from the planner will show that the proposed sign will promote the sign standards and requirements that are set forth by ordinance. In addition, it's expected that his testimony will show that the church falls within the special sign provision set forth by ordinance regarding public announcement signs for a church. And then finally, further, he will show that the requested variances for the proposed sign can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance, and are in fact consistent with the master plan. So at this point, I would like to call upon first David Aris, the president of the church.
Yeah, Counselor, I'm gonna move some stuff around. I think that if we hear just from the planner, that would help us, the board, get be a little more okay with this. So can we go with that first? And I don't want to open up to the board. I think hearing from the church is fine, but I think if they would agree to the conditions, everyone knows it's a public entity, it's a church, they're doing the right thing. You know, those three conditions that we came up with, they're good with it. I don't know that we necessarily need to hear from them. The planner is very important to tell us the benefits outweigh the detriments. And the sign person, you know, Mr. Disco's reviewed the sign and was comfortable and told us it's within the square footage and so forth. So let's start with the planner and then see what the board has to say. Is that fair?
You can start with the planner. I do think that the sign gentleman will answer any questions you might have about the specific.
Yeah, we'll see if the board has
how
any
the sign
questions.
works.
We'll see if the board has questions. Counselor, can you swear in our planner, the planner?
Good evening.
I think you're talking to Emily, correct?
Emily, yes.
Yeah.
Emily, yes.
No, I'm talking away here, forgetting I'm muted. Sorry about that. All right, Mr. Ritchie, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true in its entirety?
Yes, I do.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yeah, my full name is Thomas Ricci, R-I-C-C-I, also called me TJ. Business address, 92 Park Ave, Rutherford, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Can you tell us your qualifications and all the fun, fancy stuff about your licenses not being expired and all that stuff?
I would love to. Bachelor's degree and a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers University, licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, nationally certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners, I have testified before numerous boards, including this one pretty recently. All of my licenses and certifications are active and in good standing.
Perfect. Anyone on the board have any questions or concerns for qualifying as an expert witness? I'm seeing everyone shake their head that they're good. So, Counselor, if you want to do some brief testimony of the planner.
Okay, Mr. Ritchie, if you would be so kind as to set forth for the board why the variance relief should be granted in this particular situation.
Absolutely. And can I just share my screen just so I could briefly have an aerial
Yes.
on the screen while I testify? I think it'd be helpful. Let me see if I have screen sharing capabilities. Okay, we got it. All right. So as you guys heard, the site, Presbyterian Church, it's located on Morris Ave, GC zoning district, general commercial. Church is to remain, everything's to remain. It's just a sign replacement of the existing, the marquee sign, or they call them reader boards or movable letter signs where you walk up and you place the letters in. They want to go digital. Pretty common proposal that you now see with municipal buildings, churches, schools, etc. So you could see that if we zoom into the bottom left corner, here in red is the replacement of the sign. Just a brief, we used an aerial for this. There are this existing overhead lighting, which you see here on the outside in white. That's going to be removed because it's digital now. So it's actually going to be even a little bit tighter than what you see here. It's just the footprint is going to be this red box here, 1 foot by 6 feet. So 6 square foot footprint for the sign. So what we did was we did use an old survey to line up the lot lines with the property of the statue. And I just want to confirm on the record that the sign does not fall within that lot. We are outside of that lot, which is the reason for replacing it in the same exact location. We're kind of bound to that section of the land. So EMC signs or digital electronic signs are not permitted. As Ms. Herelick mentioned, it's interesting. The ordinance says that churches, schools, public buildings may all have an advertising, an announcement bulletin board sign. And now what we've seen in Springfield is that, the high school, the library, the municipal building, they all had those older movable letter signs and moved to the digital signs in recent times. Like I said, this is very common for these public uses, as Mr. Tiger mentioned, in instances of emergencies, of inclement weather, of Amber Alert. It's easy for them to just throw up a message that helps benefit the town, and I think that promotes safety, welfare of residents. You have people, it's all about the goal of the sign is, not only to have, you have the church displaying information of congregations and events and stuff, but then you have town related matters, and dissemination of information quickly and effectively happens through the digital signage and not people going out there and trying to pop up letters. So there really is a big benefit to being able to do this remotely and be able to control this from somewhere other than, having to go out and place those letters in. So that is a big benefit. We are seeking relief for the sign setbacks. Basically, 10 feet is required from the property lines, and we have 5.5 feet to Morris Ave and 4.4 feet to Church Mall. Like I said, we're at the mercy of not touching the statue. We're just replacing the existing sign. So really, when we look at the negative criteria and the impacts of this sign, I think this has more benefits. Like I said, you have the ability to just change the sign on demand when something happens, or even just program it to, display the church events. The great thing about digital signs is everything is so controlled. You have so much control over the brightness, the transitions, the transition timings, how it's going to change from message to message, the illumination levels, the warmth of the color of it. So it could match some of the colors of the other signs in the area. So you have so much control. It's not like you're putting up signs with, 5 gooseneck lights or 3 gooseneck lights. And then now you're kind of, it's too bright, can't do anything. So there's a lot of control over these digital LED signs, which is a big benefit. So I don't anticipate any impacts to any of the surrounding uses. There's no glare that comes off of these because they're backlit, they're internally illuminated. I just want to talk about the site triangle that was brought up in Mr. Disco's letter. So we did drop a site triangle per the ordinance. It was 500 feet in both directions on the center line along Morris Ave. You see these red lines, these lower red lines. And then 20 feet from the edge of pavement, you go backwards, and then that is where you draw that triangle, the 20 feet back, connecting with these 500 feet lines in along Morris Ave. And so what we found is the sign is very slightly falls within the site triangle, but you generally don't use site triangles for intersections that have a traffic light. So this is a signalized intersection. People are not going to be relying on making a judgment on how they can see and where they make the turn. They're going to be relying on the traffic light to tell them when to go and where to turn. So it's a safe movement out of there. So we don't anticipate, any issues with the existing sign replacement location. So that being said, I think this is a clear C2 case. As Mr. Tiger said, the benefits versus the detriments. Most of these types of uses are upgrading to digital signs. It's easier for the church. It's quicker for the church. If there's an event of an emergency, I think the church would be happy to put up, the Amber Alert, the inclement weather warnings and stuff like that. I think these signs are more effective if they're done correctly, which I think this is a perfect location in the GC zone. This is not a single family, a church in a single family district. This is along a commercial district. So I do think that it fits in. I think that, the benefits of this as a whole, especially that it's an existing sign, outweigh the detriments. That
Perfect.
concludes my direct. Happy for questions.
So are you comfortable of the three conditions that we discussed with Mr. Disco in his letter? No advertisement, there will be no advertisements on the sign. That the signage whatever messages that will be on the board will be only specific to the church property that the sign is on. And that obviously you've already, I'm believing you agreed that in the event of an emergency, the church would cooperate and allow whatever the township wanted to put on there if they wanted to.
I believe that to be correct. Mr. Relic, I would defer to you for the ultimate decision.
Yes, I've had conversations with Mr. Aris regarding this very issue. And I would just add that the church would also be amenable to advertise for the township, your Memorial Day parade, your July 4th celebration, your Veterans Park event. So yes, I would, Mr. Aris is here, so I will have him confirm that so that I'm not testifying, but that discussion was already had to be community friendly with regard to this sign.
Yeah, we'll put in the resolution, so it would be a condition, so I don't necessarily need him to testify. Mr. Disco, anything you want to add before I open up to the board with this witness?
No, and I, as I put in my letter, Mr. Ritchie, it is a signalized intersection, so you're not relying on the sight distance to avoid conflict maneuvers. That's what the purpose of the signal is, and it assigns the green and yellow and red times to satisfy that safety concern. We also reached out to police. They had no comment as well.
Great. Mr. Hughes?
No questions from Mr. Ricci. I would just offer to the board, to the extent the board is inclined to act favorably on this application, I think it should really make clear findings with respect to the potential impairment to the intent of the zoning ordinance, because as you heard, there is this prohibition on digital signs in town. So I would just urge the board to make specific findings with respect to why a digital sign for this specific use in this particular location is appropriate and does not substantially impair the zoning ordinance and the master plan. I think you've heard some of those reasons already from the applicant, but I would just urge the board to bear that in mind.
Yeah, we'll talk through it as we converse. All right, let me open it up to the board for any questions. Mr. Schwartz?
I have nothing for this witness.
Perfect. Mrs. Ruggiero?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to say Aaron because I messed up your last name after the fifth year of doing this, but go ahead.
The official last name is Laufer.
Laufer.
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wishna?
No questions for the planner. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
We're going to see what the sign looks
Yes,
like.
we're going to have the sign. We're going to have the sign guy testify next.
Okay, let's take a look.
Okay, so Counselor, let's bring up the sign guy and particularly talk about the signalization and timing and stuff like that.
Yes, I would like to call Mr. Chris Freeman of Stewart Signs.
And if we can pull it on the board for the on the screen for the board.
I'm working on
Also,
it.
with the submission came all the specs with regard to the sign, as well as a sample sign of how it would look and superimposed rather, with regard to the location.
Yeah, I think our person that does the meeting had to drop off, Apu. So I think
I'm doing it.
Okay, so can you post it on for us to see it, please? Ms.
We
Long?
have to swear in Mr. Freeman.
Yeah,
Sure,
Mr.
go. Let's
Mr.
bring
Freeman. Is he on? There's
Where
two
is
Chris
he?
Freeman. Let me promote this second one here.
There. Okay, I see him. He needs to come with video, audio.
Need to see you.
Okay.
Mr. Freeman, you need to be seen and heard.
See no evil, hear no evil.
Okay, can you all hear me now?
Yeah, but we don't see you. You have to come on video.
Okay, hang on one moment.
While we deal with this technical difficulty, I'll just remind the board that our next meeting on December 4th is in person, and we will be all together. Okay, I see him. Now he just needs to come off mute.
You need to get off the mute.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, before you start, can I swear him real quick?
Yes, please.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is true in its entirety?
I do.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Chris, Chris, Fleeman, Fleeman. I'm with Stewart Signs.
Thank you.
If you guys refer to page 23 of the presentation, that is a picture of the sign. It shows the dimensions. So again, if you all have any questions, I can open it up there. But initially, as stated before, our software, because we deal a lot with schools and churches that are actually in residential neighborhoods, this is not that case. The software is very flexible to not be intrusive. Obviously, when it's inside of residential neighborhoods, this not being the case. So when we talk about timing based on the location of this sign, in the high traffic volume during the day and evenings, a 30-second, for instance, slide that would show an event going on at the church or services or something along those lines based on the fixed, I think, and we even did a little impromptu study of the 2.5 or so minutes that they'd be sitting at traffic, they would see that repeat, as well as the sign being adaptable as speed limits increase or decrease to adjust the size of the text and make it easily readable. So again, part of the functionality. The timing of the slides is very easily programmable, expanded or reduced as needed. The colors, a quintillion avenue of colors available. So really unlimited, more than even the eye can see. If there are restrictions or requirements for certain things like no blinking or animation, the software allows the flexibility of not to use that type of that type of display. Matter of fact, it's not something I would recommend. A nice fixed image with the event or the text over the top of it is the most effective use of a digital sign. Scrolling and blinking is as we all agree would be a distraction to drivers, not the best use of a sign. Again, when we talked a little bit about brightness, obviously in the evenings, the concern about effect on neighbors, with the stoplights and the street lights in the area, it's already a well-lit area. This sign is down at ground level. It's not really going to be up, I think, with some of the apartments around, along with the ambient light sensor and the further ability of the church itself to lower the brightness if needed. being there and programming those times to be dim, and or even having the signs off at periods of time to not show imaging. That's all easily adjustable within the software.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
where can we see a picture of the sign?
yes.
It's page 23 of the presentation.
Can we put it on the screen? Do you mind putting
Yeah.
it on?
I could share it, guys. I have it up.
Oh, good. Okay.
Now, Chris, I have I think it was like a 5-page. So let me know what we
Yeah,
want to
well, I
show.
mean,
Well,
yeah, if you look right there, that if you go to
That's
the
the
next
old
page,
Right.
that's a superimposed over where the current one is.
Zoom
So,
in.
you know, if you,
Yeah.
It's fine. Mr. Barnett?
I just want to see it. Thank you.
And Mr. Disco, you had said that this sign is no bigger than the one that they have or no bigger than the ones that we have at the township or the high school.
Correct.
Yes. So, and obviously another condition that I would, and I have a question, but that I would like to add is that it's a fixed image, no blinking and so forth would be allowed. I wonder if you can spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about, you know, let's say that Mr. Disco was an angry board engineer and wanted to hack into the sign and put on something on there that wasn't appropriate.
that's a good question. So the software is multi-factor authentication. So there's no real hacking ability to hack in the sign. While there's a USB drive in the sign to both pull diagnostics down, if for some reason communication is, you can also load content. The only way that content can be loaded is to actually download it off the software onto that thumb drive and put it in there. So whether you're accessing it via the Wi-Fi antennas in between the building and the sign itself or the USB, you have to be signed in to be able to access it. So it's not really a hackable, accessible sign. The military uses our signs. A lot of municipalities. The Port of New Jersey has one of our one of the ports in New Jersey has one of our signs in Elizabethtown, and we had some strict guidelines we had to meet with the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. So if that speaks to some of your security concerns.
Yeah. You know, I probably would like some information sent to the board engineer to review afterwards, just to make sure
Absolutely.
I'm comfortable with it. Anything further, or can I open up to the board for questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make mention of one thing. The municipal building sign and the Dayton High School sign are actually 32 square feet. Only the library sign is 24, which is the same size as proposed here for the church.
Okay, thank you for correcting. That's good. Let me mark that down. Okay, so let me open up for questions. Mr. Wishna?
Sure. Sorry, I had to get off mute. I don't know if this is an appropriate question for the sign vendor or if I need feedback from our engineer, Mr. Disco. I guess in my experience of having seen these produced as part of my day job, I thought there's some kind of frequency with respect to the changing messaging and text based off of what the speed limit is on the road, because you don't want to have the messaging changing so frequently that it becomes a distraction for motorists. Is there anything with respect to either our ordinance or that basically defines what can and cannot be done relative to changing the frequency of the messaging?
So it's very flexible within the software. They could set it for 30. They can set it for 3 seconds. You can set it for 330 seconds. You can set it to stay on there all month long. So there's a flexibility to set it up. I don't recommend short increments because, like you said, you want it. The reason for the sign is to make it readable, right? So you want messaging that's up there at a safe amount of time to be read. For instance, what they kind of a little bit of science around is a 5-second read rate, where they glance, they see the sign, their eyes are back on the road.
So,
Who's responsible for the program? Is it you as the vendor or is it the owner operator?
I was wondering
Or
if we,
changing.
with a plan, letting Mr. Disco work with the vendor to come up with what would be appropriate given the speed limit and given the light, the traffic lights at the time. Would that be acceptable to you? We don't have anything in our ordinance. We don't typically grant these things. This is a public use, so it's a somewhat of a public type of use, not public, but it's a church type of a thing, the same way we would look at it if it was a temple or any other religious type of organization. Would that be acceptable to you to let Mr. Disco come up with it and work with them?
I was going to state that, if there is a standard, certainly the church will comply with it. Certainly we will cooperate with what Mr. Disco believes would be appropriate. By the same token, we just want to make sure that, it's not going to be leave the same sign up all day and only one message, because in that regard, probably they won't be able to necessarily be able to put out there a multiple event situation. But we are certainly willing to work with Mr. Disco. Obviously, I agree with you, Mr. Tiger. There is nothing in the ordinance because these are prohibited. So accordingly, there would be no direction there with regard to the timing.
Mr. Wishner, you comfortable with that from the board?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. And then I guess the only other question that's related to that is because it's on state highway, is there any jurisdiction that NJ DOT would have over electronic signage?
The answer is if it's not considered a billboard, they would not have jurisdiction on that.
Okay.
In terms of what we found when we had a billboard application on Route 78, and also when I researched the 2010 21st century, is for 45-mile-per-hour speed limits and above, the rate of change is every 8 seconds. So this would be certainly wouldn't be anything under an 8-second change. And I heard 30 seconds referenced earlier. That's certainly going to fall well within any speed limit issue for this area and from what the Morris Avenue corridor. So,
And we would never even consider some 8-second time frame or close to that, because that makes it almost look like it's just a flashing sign. So we had already discussed this prior to tonight's hearing as well.
Cool. So we'll make it as a condition of approval that timing is approved. A reasonable timing is approved by Mr. Disco with a range, so it gives you some reasonable flexibility. So, and if there's ever questions that come up, the church can work with Mr. Disco over time. Mr. Schwartz.
I think I'm okay with this witness. Thank you.
Perfect. Mr. Barnett.
I don't have any questions.
Aaron.
Is the intent for that sign to be lit 24/7?
I think that if it's not in any way disruptive to the area, it would stay on. There are certainly people that drive by in the night. If obviously there was any issue with the brightness or anything like that, due to the nearby residential, we would curb that.
So has there been any consideration of the new residential properties across the street? Is how that would affect it for the night? Has there
Yes,
been
we
any
already
study
spoke.
on that?
In fact, we had a discussion about that. I'll defer to the planner on this, but I will state that we had a lengthy discussion about the fact that where the sign is located and the fact that it's down and you've got it's a mixed use building. I was the attorney on it. You've got commercial retail on the bottom, and then the apartments start a level above. So it's not believed that sign would impact the residences. In fact, what we discussed was the traffic lights and the street sign, the street lights are far more impacting of those residents than this low down sign with its minimal lighting would be.
Yeah,
but we certainly wouldn't do anything that would negatively impact anybody in the residences.
And I would concur with that. You go on your balcony, you're looking at the street light as opposed to the sign.
And the traffic light.
And the traffic lights, yeah.
Multiple traffic lights, in fact, and multiple street lights in that area. I've been up on those balconies when it was being built. I mean, actually, it's very close to those lights.
Yep. Get a sunburn from the lights.
I have nothing else. Nothing else.
Perfect. Who'd I forget? Mrs. Ruggiero.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
And the only thing, so I just want to repeat, the fixed image was the discussion, no advertisements at all. that signage would only be used for what's being done on that property for the church, no other church in town or anything like that. And that public use, police, fire could work with the township, work with the church at any given time. You know, snow warning coming up, whatever it might be, you know, they can work with that. Any questions regarding the sign, you know, moving and changing, the board would defer to Mr. Disco to work with you guys on the sign. Okay.
I believe the church is amenable to everything you said.
Perfect. Mr. Keenan, anything further from the planner?
Nothing further from my end.
Mr. Disco?
No, I'm confident I can work with the church.
Perfect. I should hope so. Okay, let me take this opportunity to open it up to the public. Any matters of the public that wish to speak on this application? Let's see if anyone's raising their hands. Any questions? There's a chat. Can we see the sun? I don't see anything, Ms. Law. Do you?
No.
Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close this matter to the public and remand it back to the board. I think that the four conditions that I brought up were the only four. Any additional conditions of approval that the board would like to see? Okay, seeing none, then.
Mr. Tiger, I would just suggest you talk about no advertising. We may want to clarify it that, you know, the sign's not to be used for commercial purposes.
Yeah, I mean, look,
I think that's what we're saying and what our intent is.
Yeah, I don't think they can lease it out to CVS to say,
yeah,
you know, Coca-Cola is 3 for $12. I wish it was 3 for $12.
Because I think that's the purpose here, is that to the extent we're distinguishing why we're maybe willing to give a variance for a religious organization versus allowing CVS to have a display sign like this. It is the public versus the commercial use.
Yeah, I think advertising that bingo night is on Monday is fine, because that's church business that we talked about.
Right.
But leasing it out to CVS or Crunch that's going across the street for membership, that's off limits type of thing.
And I can just state that the church has no intention of doing that.
Perfect. Okay, seeing none, I think the four conditions that I read in would be the conditions of approval. And as Councilor Emily, anything further that you think that we may have missed?
No, I think you covered all of your conditions. I think, I think you heard testimony, and I think you made clear Mr. Hughes' comment earlier that the distinction and the reason that this would be okay is because it is for a public use type of use, as opposed to the commercial like you were just discussing. So I think you're good.
Perfect. All right. So let's, anyone want to entertain a motion to approve application 10-2022S?
I'll move to approve the application
With the four conditions I read.
with the four conditions inclusive.
Perfect. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Locker,
Yes.
Ms. Ruggiero,
Yes.
Mr. Barnett,
No.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, a couple quick things for the board before we go. Ms. Law, if you would reach out before I open up to the public for any other information on this thing. Well, one thing is the applicant, I believe, wants us to waive readings so the church can put up the sign. The resolution will be adopted next week at our 12-4 meeting, but I know that they have requested, because of some scheduling, that they can get this to move forward. Anyone opposed to allowing them to move forward at their own risk? Waive reading?
Yes, I'm opposed to that because I voted no.
Mr. Chairman, I would also just add that due to supply chain issues, we appreciate the waiving resolution to get started with permits and meet with Mr. Disco on the logistics. But I can tell you that sign will not be going up actually before the resolution is in place.
Are the board comfortable with it? If they're not, it's going to be adopted on Monday next week.
I'm uncomfortable with it.
Okay, so then let's do this.
That's fine.
You, Counselor, work with Mr. Disco, work with the building department, on whatever it is. I know the sign's not gonna go up before Monday anyway. Council will put the resolution before the board, for our next meeting Monday, which is less than a week away, so it should be okay.
I'm fine
Okay.
with that.
Thank you guys very much for coming. Last thing I wanted to bring up, Ms. Law, if you will reach out to the subcommittee and schedule time with them, either before the next planning board meeting, during the next planning board meeting, or they can do that virtually, meet virtually to discuss as a subcommittee, because there's only 4 members, the RPs, that would be great.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, seeing nothing, I want to take this opportunity to open this meeting up to any members of the public that wish to speak on any and all business that came before the board or anything on their mind. Ms. Law, anyone on?
I'm seeing none.
Perfect. Seeing none, I'm going to close this matter to the public, and can I have a motion to adjourn to December 4th, 2022, in person at Town Hall at 6:30?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, well, thanks you guys very, very much. Enjoy.
Thank
See
you
guys.
very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.